I need you guys' help in the comment section to decide how we feel about this. First of all, I think overall it's good news, at least compared to what we expected. But is it good enough? In other words, the RTX 4070 Ti, which officially does not exist yet. However, on that note, hardware leaker momo on Twitter has noted that NVIDIA, on their own Omniverse system requirements, has finally now actually listed a 4070 Ti. So NVIDIA has confirmed indirectly that it does exist, but we're not really expecting NVIDIA's official announcement until we see their CES 2023. That's when we're expecting to get the official stuff from NVIDIA, and that would be on January 3rd. However, the 4070 Ti is kind of the worst kept secret in GPUs right now. All of the board manufacturers, I don't know about all of them, but tons of the board manufacturers have already accidentally or on purpose, I don't know, released shots of their cards, the boxes. It's all over the place. But it's looking like yesterday, according to multiple sources, I'm showing you this videocards.com article, but they're referencing WCCF Tech, Moore's Law is Dead, XP Review, Board Channels, all of them claiming that the 4070 Ti will have an MSRP that is set 10% less than the unlaunched 4080 12GB, which is what this card actually is. Now, that card was originally going to have a $899, so in other words, a $900 MSRP, and we're now at $799 according to this rumored MSRP. Now, I'm saying rumored, but this was tons of the usual leaker sources all at the same time giving us this price, which does lend some credence to this possibly being the actual pricing. Now, this is better than what we had been seeing. If you looked at rumors just a day or two before this, we were seeing RTX 4070 Ti prices listed in China at the same price as the 4080 12GB. Had been announced for, and we were seeing some of them actually already, speaking of these being like the worst kept secret ever, guys, they were already like listed on sale in a store in Serbia, but that was at $1,400 US, which was clearly not going to be the MSRP. That one was clearly the store just trying to take advantage of somebody, I guess, if they wanted to buy it early ahead of when it's supposed to be available, all of that. But I want to know what you guys think about the $799 price point. So that is lower than we feared. When NVIDIA decided to rename the 4080 12GB and delay its launch as a 4070 Ti to better indicate its performance delta from the 4080 16GB, which is now our only 4080, a lot of people were worried that they'd still maintain the same pricing, because, okay, changing the name helps consumers, but changing the pricing, changing the name helps consumers distinguish which product is better. Changing the pricing actually helps the consumer. Now, what are these slides I'm showing here? So, well, obviously we're not allowed to, there's still an embargo out on all the reviews on the 4070 Ti's. Remember that when NVIDIA officially announced it as a 4080 12GB, they actually did release performance slides, which gives us a rough idea of what to expect here. Now, what NVIDIA was trying to show off with these slides was how DLSS 3 can boost frame rates a lot higher than DLSS 2. So the dark green here was DLSS 2, the lighter green was using DLSS 3, which is the frame generation. Watch my video on that if you want to know why comparing it directly in bar graphs like this is a little misleading, which is why the gray graphs right here are the ones you should pay attention to. The gray bars are the DLSS off performance. So if you want to see the actual raw power of the GPU when you're not comparing using DLSS frame generation, that's what we can see here. And remember that the 4070 Ti is the 4080 12GB that got unlaunched. Again, according to so many leaks now, this just has to be true. Now, what was its performance? Well, it depends on the game you're looking at. In Plague Tale Requiem at 4K with no ray tracing, it was showing as slower than a 3090 Ti, but faster than a 3080, but not a lot faster than a 3080. And then again, significantly slower than the 4080 16GB. So again, read this 4080 12GB as 4070 Ti and look at the gray bars if you want to see its actual raw power. And yes, it does have DLSS 3 frame generation, which is a cool feature. Watch my video on that. But it shouldn't just be apples to apples performance numbers comparison. Now, again, they also showed us F122 with 4K max settings, including some ray tracing, although I don't think the ray tracing in F1 is particularly demanding. And we saw, once again, the 4080 12GB losing to the 3090 Ti, but it was close. And this time having a more healthy lead over the 3080 with a frame rate of 46 versus 37. By the way, if you guys are like, well, 46 compared to 37, that's not a lot of more frames. But if you divide 46 by 37, that's a 24% actual performance lead. If we compare it here compared to the 3080, if we do 42.4 divided by, doing this off screen on a calculator, 38, I can do percentages pretty well in my head, but I'll get them actually accurate for you. That's about an 11.5% lead over the 3080 there, so a little less impressive. And then if we're looking at Microsoft Flight Simulator, which was another one that they gave us, in this one, it was one of its best showings versus the 3090 Ti, where it was basically a tie, a slight loss, but almost a tie against the 3090 Ti, and then it was winning against the 3080. So if we look at these numbers here versus the 3080, if we go 52.7 divided by 43.3, we're getting about a 22% lead. So it's looking like we're seeing anywhere from a 12% to 24% lead over the 3080 in NVIDIA's official marketing slides, which may or may not be, lining up to reality. These could be cherry-picked just to show off the new architectures. Also, it's possible that drivers have developed since then and all of this, because like I said, this card got delayed quite a bit. Along with the rebranding. So this is where I want you guys to sound in on the comment sections. If this is about the performance that we're getting, and it comes in at $799, how do you feel about that? Remember, we have the AMD competition with the 7900 XT. There's also the XTX, but the XTX is $1,000 and it's selling out at that price point, at least currently. And then we have the 7900 XT, which comes in at $900, but a lot of people feel is overpriced at that point. So how do we feel about $799 on a 4070 Ti? I'm also curious, when I eventually get one of them and do reviews and all of that, what GPUs would you like to see first in my head-to-head comparisons? Because I do the big in-depth head-to-head comparisons, all sorts of graphic settings, ray tracing on and off. What GPUs would you be most interested in seeing the 4070 Ti up against, especially given the $799 price point and compared to the types of performance numbers that we're seeing here? I think the 3080 is an interesting comparison, given that adjusted for inflation, this is kind of the pricing MSRP successor. Now, the last thing I'll say about the MSRP is that if this is like what we saw with the 4080 12GB, when NVIDIA announced the 4080 12GB, they announced that there was not going to be a Founders Edition. So it was going to be only AIB card models. And remember, AIB card models, oftentimes, they ship a few at MSRP, those sell out, and then they ship their slightly factory overclocked models for sometimes significant markups over MSRP. And since there's such a gap between $800 and the $1,200 4080 12GB, I would expect, I don't have any inside knowledge on this, but I would expect there to be some significant markups on at least some of the AIB cards to fill that gap between this and the 4080. All right, let's move on to some other news. So I mentioned how this might, compete against AMD, all of that. So how about we jump into some, okay, last little bit of NVIDIA news before we do that. We're also at the, like I said, we're expecting the CES announcement here. We are expecting to hear about the 4070 Ti. The other thing we're expecting to hear about is the is laptop GPUs. And so I will mention that we got a bit of a leak here from, well, Benchleaks, talking about performance numbers from a Geekbench leak, just an OpenCL score on a 4080 laptop GPU. With the now, I'll say that Geekbench is not the greatest benchmark to go off of, but at least it's something. It looks like it's reporting 12 gigabytes of VRAM and a OpenCL score of 178,038. Now, Benchleaks is saying that that's about 25% better than an RTX 3070, but they're not specifying whether that's a 3070 laptop. I think they actually mean compared to a 3070 desktop. I found a videocards.com article reporting on this same score for the 4080 laptop GPU. And they're reporting it as 42% faster than a 3080, but I think they're talking about a laptop 3080 score. So either way, I don't want to dwell too much on this score because, like I said, it's a Geekbench OpenCL score. But we should be hearing more about this at GeForce Beyond at CES 2023. Now let's hop into some AMD news. So there's been a lot of people talking about the junction temperatures of some of the 7900 XTX models. And some people have been trying to get RMAs for this 110 degrees Celsius junction temperatures, having troubles doing that. Some people seem to be having some success after a lot of wrangling. I'm hoping we start getting more official word from AMD, but I did want to follow up on this. One thing I want to show you guys, some people were asking, okay, now that I have a 7900 XTX AMD made by AMD reference model, what's going on with that? Well, the entire time I've been filming this video and getting all my browser tabs ready and, even just before that, the first thing I did when I got up this morning was I started up a demanding game, Plague Tale Requiem. And by the way, this is live right now. See, I can move the camera. So this is my other PC running in here to my capture card as I'm filming live right now. We've got the Plague Tale Requiem running on my 7900 XTX. It's at 4K ultra settings, and we can see that while the temperatures aren't great, we can see the GPU1 current temperature is at 72 degrees Celsius. The GPU1 junction temp is at 92 to 93 degrees Celsius. Now, while that's hot, it's not out of spec, and the card is boosting as it should. It's getting right around 2400 megahertz, which again isn't amazing boost speeds or anything like that. And we have seen these cards boost higher in other games and other situations, but this is not out of spec. So you guys wanted me to show off mine. Well, there it is. It doesn't seem to be having the, it doesn't seem to have the problem. Now I will mention that if I open up the manual tuning at all, it seems to behave a bit worse. I still don't get the 110 degrees Celsius. And then especially if I up the power limits, then I was getting to a junction temp of around 100 degrees Celsius, even 101, 102. Now, is that okay? Is that within spec? Well, one thing I want to mention is that now this article is actually from the 5700 series launch a few years ago from AMD. But back then, they were actually questioned about 110 degree junction temperatures at the time as well. And they did say that actually going up to 110 degrees Celsius is within spec. But the issue right here isn't that 110 degrees Celsius out in and of itself is out of spec. The issue is that if there's too big of a difference between your edge temp and your junction temp, that is out of spec. Now, on a lot of the Reddit posts about these that kind of blew up, we're starting to see, here's an actual AMD engineer replying to somebody complaining about the difficulty of like having this issue and the difficulty of getting the returns and all of that. And he's saying, hey, I'll stick my neck out here, jump in and talk about it. Basically, he's saying that there were, I'll just read it. We had daily meetings with directors leading up to launch, and for the week that followed, then it was the holidays, so it slowed down as more engineers took time with family. So basically, this is all happening over a bad time because a lot of the people at AMD are on vacation right now. We are well aware of this hotspot issue being reported, and we're investigating correlating steps to repro and collecting serial numbers, looks like 2 to 3 unique signatures. The ongoing COVID situation overseas is not helping matters either, as some factory representatives are out of office sick. If the card has mechanical issues, it should be able to RMA, but maybe there is something we can do to mitigate it in firmware in certain conditions. It's not clear yet. Now again, this was a couple of days ago, and also to be clear, while this guy works for AMD, at least if you believe what he's claiming, and that's his name, it seems true, he's not giving an official announcement from AMD. He's kind of sticking his neck out here and just saying what he knows. Hopefully I'm not getting him in trouble by publicizing this. I don't know. Anyway, but he put it out here in public. Now he's saying that the 110 degree hotspot is within spec if the edge temps were up around 90 degrees Celsius. But if it's 110 degrees at the junction, when the edge temp is around 70, that's not ideal. So again, if we go back to what I'm seeing on my card's behavior is within spec. My edge temp is around 72, whereas my junction temp is around 92. Now, if my edge temp was getting up to 92, then the junction temp getting up to 110 would actually kind of be within spec. That's not too big of a delta, although we'd probably want to tune things down a bit, you know, and question why we were getting those temps in the first place. The point is, having a large gap of your GPUs reporting 70 degrees, but the junction temp is 110, that's out of spec. And so I'm hoping that while some people are initially having trouble getting help on this, I'm hoping that that's really just down to a lot of people being out of the office at AMD and them maybe taking longer than we would like to get ahead of the game here on what's going on and how to respond to it. Now, PowerColor Steven on the same Reddit thread, so somebody working for PowerColor, which is one of the AIB board partners who I think do some of the made by AMD designs, also said, just adding this in here in case anybody has not seen my other post, if you're dealing with the 110 degree Celsius issue and nobody else is helping you out, doesn't matter which AIB, in other words, he works for PowerColor, but doesn't matter which one you have. He says to send him an email or direct message since emails are not working right today. Also, please don't use chat as that is not working correctly. I'm censoring the language there a little bit. I'm putting together a list for my AMD contacts of how many issues we're seeing. They asked if it was just a few users. I said it's definitely more than a handful. So now I need to show some sort of backing for my fat mouth. Send me serial numbers. I'm sending an email to the AMD guys with how many units are affected. PowerColor, Sapphire, Gigabyte, AMD Direct, whatever. Send me serial numbers. So in other words, it looks like at least a few days ago, he was looking to help out and try to compile some info and stick his neck out to his contacts. So that's interesting. I'll link all my stuff in the description to this video if you guys want to jump in and see any of this for yourself or participate. Now, another kind of negative AMD headline I was seeing was AMD Locked Radeon RX 7000 series power play tables limiting overclocking. However, this isn't really limiting the kind of overclocking that normal people did through the drivers and things like that. When I dug into this further, what this is really getting into is I think there's a more advanced method of overclocking that I've never got into myself, where you adjust the GPU settings through the Windows registry instead of a BIOS mod or BIOS swap. And this is more extremely advanced overclocking techniques that the average user probably isn't doing. But you could do this on the previous generations of AMD GPUs. So I think this headline is just saying that that particular method of overclocking is locked down on the 7000 series. Anyway, moving on to a different kind of 7000 series, AMD's Ryzen 7000 non-X series CPUs are apparently set to launch January 10th, and the Ryzen 9 7900 faster than the 5900X. Now, we're getting this from video cards, so this is not officially announced, but they're showing off some official-looking slides that have the release date and pricing. So it's looking like we'll be seeing the 7600 non-X at $229, the 7700 at $329, the 7900 at $429, and again, they seem to have a release date of January 10th. So these are coming very soon, and I'd imagine this will be one of the things that we actually hear about officially at CES. Now, how do we feel about this pricing? Well, compared to the MSRPs of the X series, the prices seem good, but compared to what the X series is actually selling for on Amazon, this is actually only like $20 discounts, if that, because it's $230, but you can get the X version for $240 on Amazon right now. So like, I don't know. It's really a lot of the motherboard pricing that we'd really want to be seeing coming down here. But they are also showing off this slide, which should be embargoed. So in other words, we'll probably see this at CES, but Video Cards has it early, apparently, showing the 7900 non-X versus the 5900X. So the previous generation, and showing some generational uplifts and all of that. They also have some gaming benchmarks showing the 7900 against the 5900X. So to me, this isn't super interesting because it's compared to the previous generation. But if you're considering upgrading from the 5000 series, there's at least some gaming benchmarks here as well. And it is showing some big boosts, especially in certain games like F1 2021 and Far Cry 6, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, a few other ones, some of them less impressive. Anyway, speaking of motherboards pricing, Biostar launches the B650M silver motherboards for AMD Ryzen 7000 CPUs, but I didn't see a price tag attached for it. And that's the big thing that we want to see, is price tags coming down on the motherboards for this platform. Now, speaking of these issues, it apparently still seems like they're having some trouble selling these because Mind Factory in Germany is a German retailer who actually publishes their sales figures on different products. And so videocards.com is reporting on tabulating the sales of the 7000 versus the 6000 series. And the 5600X has been such good value lately that they're getting it as sold as about 91 per day at this retailer. Versus seeing about 21.7 per day on the 7600X. And the 7700X seems to be the most popular model from the 7000 series, selling 32.6 per day. So anyway, I thought that was just some interesting stats. Now, this again, the 7000 series pricing has been coming down. But like I said, I think motherboards coming down would be good. But I think a lot of people are waiting for the X3D version. So I think in some ways AMD might have shot themselves in the foot with the 5800X3D showing such good performance that a lot of people were like, well, I'm just going to wait for the X3D version of the 7000 series. Anyway, speaking of motherboard pricing, Intel B760 motherboard pricing has leaked and actually looks like it's cheaper than B660 launched at, although more expensive than you can currently buy a B660. Now, why is that relevant? Well, B660s would still support the 13th gen chips, I believe, because their 12th gen and 13th gen have the same socket. Now, it's Chilled Dog, another prolific hardware leaker here with these numbers, and he's been fairly accurate, and I think he accurately leaked the B660 pricing last time around. So I would believe that these are probably accurate, and so we're seeing them ranging all the way from 169 for the Pro A Wi-Fi up to 209 is that the MPG Edge Wi-Fi? And now, again, the B760, these are the step down, right? These aren't your X770 or G790. Geez, I'm spacing motherboard naming right now. You get the idea. Anyway, so that pricing should probably be accurate. We'll probably see these actually announced officially at CES along with the slower Intel chips. Now, speaking of these motherboards as well, it's looking like there is a chip here which is a clock generator. Now, why is that interesting? Because the non-K Intel chips, which is what I was trying to say, I think we'd be seeing at CES, and these motherboards are kind of going to come out coinciding with, the non-K Intel chips can't be overclocked traditionally. But if your motherboard has a clock generator, you might be able to do some B-clock overclocking, which could be interesting, and it's looking like that's a shot of a clock generator on one of these boards. So, kind of interesting. We're seeing some headlines that AMD focuses on various driver improvements for RDNA 3 GPUs running on Linux. So driver improvements on Linux. I'm not going to dive too far in here because I know Linux is a bit of a minority, but you could look into my sources if you're interested in more of the details here for you Linux users out there. Now, In more game news and game tech news, I guess might be what I'd say. It's looking like Return to Castle Wolfenstein's path tracing mod gets FSR2, DLSS2, and XeSS support, and there's a tentative release date of 2023. So looks like Return to Castle Wolfenstein is another game getting the full path tracing mod treatment. In other news, we're seeing Streets of Tarkov finally added to Escape from Tarkov alongside AMD FSR 2.1. So previously, Escape from Tarkov supported DLSS and AMD's FSR 1.0, which is a spatial upscaler. FSR 2.1 can look a lot better, especially at more aggressive upscaling settings. So it's nice to see that being updated into the game. So if you're a Tarkov player and don't have an NVIDIA RTX GPU, maybe take a look at that. And then also in other PC gaming news on the emulator side, kind of big news for the RPCS3 PlayStation 3 emulator. They're saying they're delighted to announce that as of today, the RPCS3 loaded compatibility category has reached 0 games, which means there are no PS3 games left that boot to a black screen. So every PS3 game should at least boot. Now, just because it boots doesn't mean you can actually play it or play it without bugs, but it's still progress. Again, I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on this $799 pricing, given this type of performance that we were seeing from NVIDIA themselves. Like to know about that. Also curious your thoughts on the whole junction temperature stuff and all of that. I hope all of you have an excellent day.